Okay. Well, nanaskumtan, Kara, for your lovely sharing. Yeah, really fascinating. Like, what a great idea to have a studio video and tour and sharing some of your processes. I just want to start by introducing myself and placing myself before I get into the Prezi. Masquamos dus kisagokas ku nisigasan egwa Lynette La Fontaine. Apita kosasan niya Dastawinawak niya. My spirit name roughly translates as Bear Buffalo Northern Lights Woman. I'm Métis from my late dad, Richard La Fontaine. I'm Two Spirit. My mom, Lynette La Fontaine, is of French and Irish ancestry. And I'm a parent to two young adults, age 23 and 21. So I'm currently calling or speaking to you from the Sartlip and Wasanish traditional territories. So on my, address, it says Saanich. Other folks around Victoria. So there's a group of territories, and together they're known as Lekwungen speaking people. So I'm still learning some of the protocols and building relationship with folks here. I was born in Burns Lake and grew up in Fraser Lake on Stalatin territory. Post high school, I lived in Nakasley territory, where I was actually a lumber grader until I was 29, and then I moved to Clelitane territory in Prince George to attend UNBC, where I graduated from Bachelor of Science in Nursing in 2009. So my late dad was born in Big River, Saskatchewan, and when he was 2, his family moved to central BC for the forest industry. So if you're familiar, there's a pretty large Métis community in central BC due to that industry. And it was just so lovely, Haley, to hear the acknowledgement of traditional territories. And so some of you may speak and understand when I'm sharing the words and phrases that I'm learning in our Michif language. So connected to Northern Saskatchewan, it's definitely called Northern Michif, and much more in Heiau, like very little French. But the fact that my mom has French and Irish ancestry, I'm not quite bilingual anymore. Did not hear those languages growing up. I've had to learn them through my teen years and into my adult life. So in 2007, I began my beading journey. And I do want to make note that because of residential school legacy, and not one of us as Indigenous people are exempt, whether directly or indirectly, we've experienced cultural breaks from that was a major colonial act of violence in our history. And then as Métis people, we have our own unique history in terms of attempts at trying to erase us. So, like I said, I didn't get to hear our traditional language growing up, but my grandmother, Caroline Pruden, was a fluent speaker. And as I was learning, my dad started to have remembering of our language. So before he died at age 58 in 2012. So when I was in nursing school, I had the opportunity from the Métis Nation of BC to attend an immersion camp for Michif. And I wanted to receive credit for that. I'm going to talk circular. It's always going to come back around. Stay with me. I'm going to share in story style. And so I found out I could do that, get credit for learning Michif by doing an independent study. So Métis professor Dr. Fari Jean Gravelin agreed to oversee my work, and then the Prince George Métis Elders agreed to have me volunteer with them. So I did over 200 hours. And so it was that summer in 2007 that I asked the elders if anyone could teach me to bead. And no one could. So they handed me a hand-drawn piece of beading instructions from our master Métis beader, Janine Crouchy, who is still alive today and currently has a phenomenal piece in A Hard Birth, as well as another exhibition, Radical Stitch, if you look that up. And she made the 26-foot long octopus bag in the Human Rights Museum that's in Winnipeg as well. So because I grew up sewing with my mom, I was able to jump in and just teach myself from those instructions. I also believe in blood memory, which many folks talk about now. And I think both those things helped me. And I made this 3x4 foot wall hanging with photos of my family and beaded parts of the frame, which I plan to revisit now that it's been many years later and I have a lot more skills. So that was one of a life-changing events for me. In my short 46 years, I'm okay to say how old I am. And so after that, I beaded a purse for my auntie. And then I started into small things like beaded feather stems and maybe a bracelet. And because what I saw about Métis beading was we beaded everything, and they were often really large pieces. And at the time, I could only study in books. With the Prince George Métis Elders, we did go to Edmonton, and I did visit the Métis exhibition at the museum there. I bought a little journal and made my notes, and just as much as I could study those florals. And I really felt validated by Janine Crouchy, who said, even 15, 20 years ago, there weren't that many beaders. So there wasn't a lot of people either carrying this knowledge and or passing on this knowledge. And no one in my direct family was beading. So for me, beadwork is a huge component of our cultural expression and identity. So it's always been really important for me. And I just felt a calling to want to learn it. So I got tips and tricks along the way. And then in 2016, I came across the First Peoples Cultural Council grant, and I was able to approach Lisa Shepherd for a short mentorship, and she agreed. And she shared her style of beading and also taught me how to make moccasins. So that vastly changed and helped me improve my beading to what I wanted was a more professional level. I've always been a community health nurse since graduation, and I was working at the university actually as a university nurse at UNBC at the time. And it was another life-changing moment in my life. It opened doors to begin other mentorships. So if I were to do it all over again, I would love to have attended Emily Carr. I don't feel at this time in my life that I will ever go to art school. So I'm really grateful that people in my life introduced me to the idea of mentorship. And it's quite the journey to approach people, build relationship with them. So I'll often ask other Métis artists and knowledge holders and elders if they're willing to share. And I always try to find funding and do it in a good way. So incorporating our traditions of how do we ask, how do we gift, how do we form those relationships, and then being able to get funding, which doors are opening for us now, and looking at ways in which as Indigenous people we express ourselves and the way in which we transfer knowledge, and the importance of and the urgency of learning these traditional art forms so they're not lost and so that they can be passed on. So the basis for this Prezi comes from a talk that I did in 2018. It's found on the UNBC website under the First Nations Center, and there's an Aboriginal speaker series. So I've just updated it and adapted it, and the photo in the middle shows me last year after I created this two-spirit mask which was part of a show called On Beaded Ground at the UVic Legacy here in Victoria. And it was a collaborative, well, this, I didn't collaborate with anyone particularly who's living, but it was to accompany a two-spirit tunic by Margaret August and Nicole Mandrick. So this has the two-spirit colors that Sharon Prue Turner teaches that are violet, red, yellow, two-tone blue. And the statement "Fire Back" comes from an ancestor piece that I saw at the Manitoba Museum in 2020 when I attended the beading symposium. So that idea of putting myself back together, also being a trauma survivor, but also like in terms of intergenerational trauma and piecing back together my family story and reconnecting with my culture. So I grew up hunting and fishing, and gardening and harvesting. So those were all really valuable too. But no ceremony or other parts that I've, been connecting to. So can you go to the next slide? Mm-hmm. And you guys can see me in the corner, right? So, so people often say this, that, beading is medicine. So I chose to name this talk "Beading as Medicine," and share a bit of my personal journey as I am already. So these are two little newborn moccasins that I made for my first great nephew from my brother's oldest daughter. And yeah, his were the second pair of moccasins that I made for babies in our family. So I'm making it a tradition that I'm beading the babies coming into our family their first pair of moccasins. So as most of you are probably familiar, that's the medicine wheel on his tiny little moccasins. And then I just have some medicines there. So I do want to share this little zine that I contributed to called "Beading as Medicine," and it's in volume 1. So I wrote, "The art and practice of beading is my life. I dream it, study it, gift it, sell it, teach it, and barter beadwork. I feel connected to myself, my ancestors, the plants or animals I'm beading or inspired by, and to others when I'm beading. For me, it's a spiritual practice. Everything is intentional. The time, materials used, color choices, and design elements. I connect to spirit and my heart to elicit connection through my beadwork. Through the time and art of beading, I've grown in my self-worth and self-love. It's part of my life legacy." So I was taught when we heal 7 generations back and 7 generations forward. So I'm going to share more of that here in this presentation. Next slide, please.
Oh, should I hit it again?
Again. Prezi also like goes in and out.
Oh, okay.
There you go. Yeah. So Miotaman means good road. And what I wanted to share here is a continuum of a little bit of what I shared already. Is on my healing journey in reconnecting, I started to attend ceremony. So when I got my spirit name, I received that in Sweat Lodge. And one of my late elders, Leonard Ward, maybe some of you know him, maybe he's visited your community, I don't know. He's from Driftpile, Alberta. And he married into a family in Stalaco, actually. And so he, in his party days, partied with my dad and grandma. And in his later years on his healing road, he went back to ceremony. So we worked for a short time together when I was nursing. And I started to attend his Sweat Lodge, and he started to talk to me about fasting. So from 2008 until 2019, I lived a sober life because I was very actively involved in ceremony and made it part of my nursing practice. So now it's part of my beading practice. And this year, actually, not this week coming up, but next week, my son and I are traveling to Northern Alberta, where he's going to be fasting for the first time for his spirit name. So I really feel like that's coming, I don't want to say full circle, but it feels like it. That, you know, I've been a bit of a path forger and having to break that trail again for my family. And it's been really lonely. I've done it without a lot of support. And so to be able to go and support my son means the world to me. So next slide. So I talked a little bit about how the past, you know, kayas means a long time ago and anoch means today. So how do I sit in between those two things, and how do I make them come together? So I've had to spend a lot of time talking to people. You know, we're getting a lot more stories in print now. A lot more people are sharing our Métis stories. We just attended the Métis Studies Symposium, where a lot of great Métis thinkers and artists and elders gathered online. And I couldn't even have dreamed that, you know, over 10, 20 years ago. So this photo here is of the story of the birch bark canoe. And as taught to me by Earl Henderson, he's a Métis elder, and Canada's 150th anniversary brought some funding opportunities. So in the Prince George area, the Francophone Society was able to bring in a Métis knowledge holder to teach how to build a birch bark canoe. And so, of course, we share that history and included the Métis community. So this flower here is representative of all the colors of birch bark that I remember seeing growing up. You know, how it can be like white or cream, but it can also get to like that pinky or light brown color. So that's just a freehand flower. And down below one of the puzzle pieces, you see that off-colored bead. It's called a spirit bead. And that's a humility teaching that no one or nothing is perfect. It's cut off a little bit on top, but there's cedar. So cedar wood is used to make the ribs and the benches in the canoe. And then after they build it, all the shavings are kept. And in ceremony, they're burned. And then spruce pitch is added into the ashes, and those fill in the cracks to fully seal that canoe, along with bear grease. So the blueberries are for the bear, and the spruce bough is for the spruce pitch. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I started to feel those puzzle pieces coming together. The background photo, and you're going to see the full piece, is the current one that I completed last year as well. You gotta look in that small little pin as I'm going to show a picture. But it's called Kukumanawak Sagitawan Kayasochi, Grandmother's Love from Long Ago, and Elder Diane Ludwig named it for me. So it shows some fish scales there and a combination of beadwork. After learning with Lisa Shepherd in 2016, I did a residency with Studio 2880 for a year. I did a lot of painting, surprisingly, that year. I love to work with acrylic paints and do large abstract paintings, which is the total opposite of my beadwork, which is really small and fine. And I did some collaborations with Michael Cast, who was another artist in resident. They chose 2 of us that year, which was new. So the fish scale knowledge comes from Jamie Morris, a Métis artist out of Lac La Biche, lives in Ottawa. I have some family in Lac La Biche area as well, especially the La Liberties, and there's some Morans there too. It's a Métis art form that came out of the 1950s and 1960s out of the Lac La Biche area, and specifically the whitefish scales are really like durable. They're quite hard. They come off like sequins, and so I've been experimenting using them as sequins, as you see here in the center of the flower. So it's really my lifelong goal to learn all our Métis art forms. And up in the left-hand corner, you can see a little bit of tufting, and that's elk hair specifically. You can tuft any hollow hair. And the thing is, like, we, try not to waste any part of the animal. I think we probably used more historically than we do today. But I love that many of the things that we can't eat from fish or plants or animals became part of our art practice. Next slide, please. Again, sorry.
Got it. I got it now.
I'm sorry you have to do this for me.
That's
Thank you very much.
No problem.
This is one of my abstract paintings, a little portion of it. So, Nana ta healing day after day for a long time. Next slide, please. I will get to a bunch of photos. Asapitam, so ties together in a bundle. This was a wall hanging that I created probably in 2018. It shows paintbrush, fireweed, there's corn, because that spoke to the commission and the folks I was creating it for, and lupins. So it's not specifically the 4 direction colors, but I liked this image as a background. So for me, beadwork encompasses the medicine wheel. The mental component, obviously, there's a lot of knowledge to pick up and learn. Anytime I work with fur or hide or wool, there's so much knowledge embedded in working with those materials. There's only so much I can get via, like, say, words or people showing me, and then it's a matter of me building relationship with those materials and learning experientially. So there's a lot of deep listening that happens. The physical aspect is quite remarkable, the amount of work that is required in my art practice. So even like porcupine quills is immensely laborious, from the harvesting to the cleaning to the sorting to the dyeing to then using them. Same with whitefish scales. So a lot of cleaning. And then, yes, the dyeing of them. I'd say it's one of the hardest art forms I've learned this far, has been the whitefish scales. It's also really hard on my body. So, like, learning hide tanning, and even like the act of sitting for long periods of time is really hard on my body. So learning to take micro breaks and incorporate walking and stretching and limiting my time sitting. I'm sure every artist can say that, but I do find ergonomically it's really hard on the body. The emotional component, I really, try to connect and use, and all these intertwine and are related. Not one part is separate from, but using my intuition, but I also have knowledge around color theory, using a variety of textures in my beadwork. So if that's different finishes, different sizes, whether that's vintage with contemporary beads, that really places me in today's, like 20 years from now, people are going to go, oh yeah, that's from these years. I can tell beadwork from, say, the 1980s, even the 1970s, and it's really interesting. And the spiritual component is whether ideas come to me via dreams or talking to people about what they carry, the gifts they carry, and trying to incorporate that into my beadwork. And I'm always telling a story. I really love this idea that our beadwork are storied objects. And we start to recognize one another by the colors we choose, by the way we lay the beads, from our tension to the type of thread we use to the type of materials we use. Because there's no way to sign our work, I'll go next slide, please. Mm-hmm. So I love this term, otipemisiwak. It's a Western term for Métis people. It means that we're the boss of ourselves, or we own ourselves. It can be a beautiful teaching for any person to know that you're the boss of yourself. and because we weren't allowed to be a part of treaty. So this painting was a collaborative one done with Michael Castor in my 2018 residency with Studio 2880. So it's had community members put layers in there. And then I used an image of Michael's photograph and has a buffalo with an image in it. And I love that you can see inside, like you can see some of those layers. And the buffalo, even though this is colonial, is facing what I deem forward, which is the way we read in English, right? Left to right. Because I wanted to emulate hope and resiliency and moving forward. So it's like it's coming from the past, it's in the present, moving to the future, and embedded in this buffalo is our ancestors and all those things we've gone through, including all the beauty and knowledge and everything. Next slide, please.
Can I just say one thing about that term?
Otipemisiwak?
Yeah, otipemisiwak. It's was such an amazing term for me to discover as well. And its meaning, like being Métis myself, is just like, oh, otipemisiwak, the people who own themselves. That track.
Truly. Right? It's so strong.
Yeah. It fits, I feel like, of a lot of people. Yeah. Yeah, it tracks.
Stubborn buffaloes.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to share a few examples of my work. I do have an Instagram and Facebook handle, as well as a website now that's live. And I go by otipemisiwak Artist. So this one was done in 2018 as well. I wrapped it around a 4x4 piece of cedar from Haida. So it's now in a private home, but I've used this image in a lot of some secondary products that I make for bags, etc., just to make my beadwork more accessible. It's very, very time consuming. I think I figured out that an inch of beadwork takes an hour. So just the amount of time it takes and energy. A lot of people don't necessarily want to pay the actual amount that it's worth. I do want to say that I find this art form to be quite genderized. And I think, though, like as a community, like as a whole and cross-culturally as Indigenous people, we're doing our work to uplift one another and increase the value of our work, to say to buyers that this takes a lot of time and knowledge, and it's not cheap. And also we deserve good wages. So, but in creating those secondary products, I'm just making it more accessible. So you can see here in this one, the multitude of beads that I've used. There's some glass cut. This is where I geek out. There's some metallic ones. There's some translucent ones. And in the leaves are, I believe those are all vintage. So sometimes I can source those. And they're usually from France or Italy. Nowadays, we still get a lot of our beads from Czechoslovakia, so Preciosa beads. And then there's some Japanese companies that are making high quality beads too. Next slide, please. This is from a shawl that I made as a commission. It got cut off for some reason. I couldn't. So this is the back. This is my interpretation of a huckleberry flower. So it's like as if you're looking at one from the bottom, and obviously it's blown up. And this shows some contemporary work in mixing the media. So there's some caribou hair tufting there, along with the beads, when historically you would just see tufting on its own, framed. Fish scales, you would just see it on its own, framed, and then beading would just be beads with beads. So I love this contemporary mixed media practice that many of us are doing. Next slide, please. And yeah, there's some vintage beads in there too. Again, in 2018, I started to create some fur-backed earrings, which felt really new to me. But again, through blood memory, that's, whoa, something happened.
Oh, my.
Is that my end?
I think
somebody's trying to phone me.
Are we good?
No. What's happening?
Uh-oh.
Okay, just wait. It says click to exit full screen. I don't know. It's like, can you guys see me okay?
I can see you. Yep.
You're like got white all across the way.
I don't know. You want to just try and refresh and
Sure.
Your audio is just connecting still. It says connecting audio. Oh, there you are. Are we good?
I believe so.
Okay. Good. All right, back into it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so it's something that I still do. It's a really great way to use scraps of fur, you know, that come from moccasins. This piece, though, I liked Jamie Morris's interpretation of this, that it reminded her of like those willow china pieces that many of our grandparents had, like that cabochon in the middle there, which also spoke to her around the idea of terra nulla. So like that, you know, how we were colonized, that there was no one here. So she really saw it as a way of like indigenizing and reclaiming. So I love her interpretation of this beaded earring. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this one here is Grandmother's Love from Long Ago. It's only 7 inches across. Here I really pulled from my study of ancestor work. So all these florals are not original to me. They're found on many ancestor pieces. But I've used a combination of size 15 beads with size 11 beads. There's some fish scale shapes in there, tufted elk hair, and then the fish scales in the middle. And this, by the time I was finished it really reminds me of our smoking caps. And so it sits on a round cedar plank, and it's thick. It's like made from 2x4s, placed together, then cut in a circle. So the beaver fur is probably a good 2 inches in height. Yeah, so it's almost like you could pick it up off that cedar plank and place it on your head. And I love the circular movement of this piece. It taught me a lot. And I really feel like it's an amalgamation of everything that I've learned so far. So this is many years of putting in my hours of beading and mentoring with several different folks. And this was also part of the On Beaded Ground with the UVic Legacy last year.
Yeah, it's an amazing piece.
Thank you. Next. And it's also going to Saskatchewan and Saskatoon to the Ramai in the fall.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, for a Métis exhibition. So this one here was a bridal pendant. So it's a necklace that I created. So here I like the close-up of this for you all to see. So the two yellow, there's fish scales that are rolled into cones, and then there's porcupine quills through them with a bead on the end, and that's what's attaching it to the fabric. So really just trying to experiment like how, because I said they're normally framed and glued to hold their place, or maybe there might be a stitch or two, but when you think about wearing something, the amount of touching, or maybe something's going to snag it, I'm really just trying to figure out how to best attach these materials, and so far so good. And then there's the blueberries there with the elk hair. Yeah, next slide please. Oh, I'm done.
Great.
So happy to take any questions, comments. I didn't share that I am a full-time practicing artist, and I've been growing my art practice for since 2016. I have a lot of art knowledge from my mom, who's also a professional artist, and consider her a lifelong mentor. So I'm either mentoring like being mentored or mentoring. I feel like that's my lifelong journey.
That's great. Yeah, and it's a cycle, right, of
Yeah.
giving and receiving. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who is your mom? I'd be curious to look up her work.
Absolutely. Lynette La Fontaine. It's
Yeah.
Leetta. Lieta.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And she's a portrait artist as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
I guess I'm curious, how has the Métis Symposium gone? Or I think it's over now. It kind of overlapped with everything here, but I'm kind of sorry.
Yeah, you were so busy. Yeah, it was 4 days, so Tuesday to Friday, I guess midday. It was incredible. There was such a variety of topics and presenters, and I kind of like caught a couple. I think one day I was on from 8 a.m. till like 6:30 at night because there was a virtual tour of A Hard Birth with the two curators, Sherry Farrell-Rassett and Kathy Mattis.
Nice.
Yeah.
And were any of those events recorded, or?
I don't think so. I really wish they were. I know. Yeah.
That's okay. Catch the next
year. Yeah, so the grandmother's love from long ago is going to Ramai, and I'm beading a tea cozy, which will be my first, and maybe the fireback mask. We'll see. And so the theme is storied objects.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I had a question about the two spirit colors. Like, what are the significance of each color? Yeah.
It was just so in the book, She Who Walks for Days Inside 1,000 Eyes by the late Sharon Prue Turner. She said it was teachings from her elders. She doesn't break down what each color means. She just repeats, violet, red, yellow, two-tone blue as being the two spirit colors. Yeah.
Okay.
So I've been playing again with that teaching, right? I did get connected to one of her daughters online, who I think is using some of her mom's work as her thesis too. So yeah, it's a remarkable book. There's a lot of teachings in there.
Okay, awesome. I got to check it out. I've got a reading list about a mile long.
Well, it's poetry. Well, that one you could like read in sections, like as a story, but you could like pick it up and just read a little bit every night.
Awesome. Yeah, I don't know. I really love how you incorporate all the different elements, and it all seems so seamless. But it's interesting that you, point out that that's just a contemporary practice now. Like you wouldn't have seen it, before. Yeah, it just the fish scales are just so elegant, especially like in Grandmother's Love from long ago. Like the way the cone-shaped flowers are just laid down, and I don't know.
Yeah. Like I said, it took a while to learn how to shape them. Here, I have some. Sometimes I use Kool-Aid, but
to dye them.
What? Can you see that?
Oh yeah. Oh, so that's like a full scale.
Yeah. Scale. I have some close-up photos that I could probably send you, but to learn that there's a front and a back and a top and a bottom, and so they're only going to curl a certain way. So, and Erin Consumo shared some of her knowledge with me too. She's one of Jamie Morris's mentees as well. So we do Jamie style, and she gave a really, as she calls, nerdy talk on fish scales at the symposium, which I absolutely adore. So she was the one who was able to explain all those parts of the fish scale, because I'm like trying to roll a cone and it's not staying in the shape. I'm like, what am I doing
wrong? The material's got a mind of its own.
Well, it has a purpose at how it sits on the fish. So it naturally wants to curl a certain way versus the other way. Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Very scientific, but also very practical.
Yeah.
Even just.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, well, I mean, it's like kind of similar, even with the beads. Like they always want to lay a certain way too, and you kind of just got to figure out what that is. Yeah,
that's true. And they're going to lay a different way on different material. So every time you use a new material, they're going to lay differently for you. It may be subtle, but one of my mentors, Kim Stewart, another Métis artist, was saying when she was using a really shiny paper and she was beading on it, and they were just like ice. They were just sliding, like curling rocks. And she was having a hard time, having them sit where she wanted them to. I thought that was cute.
That is funny. Yeah. And then the hide will they'll stay pretty well usually when you want where you want.
Yeah, because it's fuzzy. Same with wool or velveteen, right?
Yeah.
This is what I'm saying. The depth of knowledge starts to increase, where it's not just like beads on fabric. There's the cultural knowledge, whatever you bring, whichever culture you're from, and teachings and protocols, and could be colors, could be shapes, could be flowers. Yeah. And then there's the parts of like even like, the reindeer hair, caribou hair, like how you dye them, and let alone how you shape it, it takes a lot of part. Yeah. And the fish scales was like, I could keep a journal on the temperature of the water, the length of time in the water, because if I put quills in the same water, they would pick up the dye differently than a fish scale or fabric, right?
Yeah, there's just so much to it. Oh man, I'm still wrapping my head around beadwork. It just feels like it's like another universe. I'm not ready for it yet.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I thank you for the time to share. I don't know if anybody has any questions. And is this being shared online for a while?
Yeah, it'll be on our YouTube page, and I think also on like the Open Sky website.
Nice.
So, yeah. Any other questions?
I just want to say thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. It's super nice to learn more about your process and your work, and just cool to get that insight. And I do have a couple of questions. I'm curious, just in the process of like how you start a piece, like where do you start? Like, do you map it out? Do you sketch first? Do you just kind of jump right in? What sort of piece
No, I definitely old school sketch things. I'm currently mentoring for learning how to digitize and build an online library for myself. But I'm still more confident in paper. So generally have an idea in my head. I'll draw it out, and then I use a water soluble film, which I trace the drawings on, and then I layer my fabrics up so that I'm able to rip it away and then rinse it, and it completely is gone. So, and just like you and your paintings, how you make adjustments along the way, I really listen to that. It's like, oh, I thought that kind of flower or leaf or stem or whatever was going to go there. No, that's changed. And I think about I do think a lot about composition. Like, I think even in this one, I did draw like, I think 3 different circles for like creating different height, and even that teaching around like odd numbers. But in this is a lot of teachings from ancestor work, so we often have a central flower and then the connecting vines, and playing with the yellow vines is in ancestor work, which I hadn't done. So I have like my own drawn library of different flowers and whatnot, and I play with them.
Super cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think I'd like to share process work with people, for sharing that knowledge, but also it just makes it so interesting to like how it happens, because the hair and the scales, like they're the last things to go on, right? Because I don't want to be touching it and manipulating it for a long period of time. So I have to think in layers. I have to think in steps. Yeah. And even the color. Yeah. And
I was going to just thank both of you for your presentations. They're both excellent.
Thank you.
I was just wondering for like the beadwork and the teaching, how that's going to be sustained going forward. Like you're talking
Well, I'm hoping that mentoring other people will keep passing on the knowledge. Sorry, you're froze. I hope I'm not froze.
You're not froze. He's
okay.
froze.
I hope you can still hear me.
Yeah.
Yeah, some people are putting things in print, right? So Gregory Schofield is one of our historians and has put out several books with the Gabriel Dama Institute. Hopefully there'll be more people. I mean, Christy Belcourt just put out a book, right? I mean, it's paintings, but yeah, there's that one, but there's a new one. I love that one. But there's a new one of her, of kind of like her history of work. So yeah, it has to be passed down generationally though. So I have a niece who is interested in beadwork. Other people I've shared knowledge with, they're teaching their children. Yeah. And then now we have the internet. Will that always remain? I don't know. And that's been a conversation around what's okay and not okay to share online, and how youth access information has greatly changed, and we have to start rethinking or adapting some of our protocols, I believe. So they would be great conversations with knowledge holders and elders. Yeah, I hope that answered his question.
Yeah, I think it's just growing. Like you said, 20 years ago, you couldn't get 5 people around a table to bead together. Now it's huge.
So many. Yeah. It's so great. Well,
yeah, I mean, I think that's a great spot to end it, unless there's anything else. But yeah, just thank you so much. I'm just so grateful to you guys for all the thought and energy you put into this, and we really greatly appreciate it. I think it was so valuable for the artists today. So thank you so much.
Thank you for all your hard work, Haley. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. I mean, yeah, then thank you for, kind of rolling with the punches a little bit.
Absolutely.
But we got there. We made it through. Yeah.
Yeah. And so nice to meet you, Kara. And nice to meet you too, Haley. I'm sure we'll stay in touch.
I hope we all get to stay in touch and connect again. It's been a real delight working with both of you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Sounds great. Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, thank you again, and good night, everybody.
Examaga.
Take
Good night.
Take care.